here today with Amanda Burdan from the Brandywine River Museum. The opening of their Women's Vote project and exhibit that is at the beautiful Brandywine Museum in Chadds Ford. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Judy.
How did you come up with this concept?
You know, the exhibition is called A Visual History, and that's a little bit different from what an art museum would normally do, or what you might see in an art museum. I realized that just painting, sculptures, drawings, that wasn't going to tell us the story of the suffrage movement, but it was a very visual story to tell because women used posters and postcards and banners and film and all sorts of visual media to get their message across. So this ended up being an exhibition that's got more objects in it than any other show we've ever done. Well over 200 objects in this show.
Very inspiring. So what inspired you to do this?
Well, my field of study in art history is women artists. And that's really where I started. I knew the suffrage anniversary was coming up, and I delved into, at first, what women artists were doing for the cause and for the movement. And it grew from there. And so I think the same kinds of things I study about women artists of the 19th century, how did they make their way in the professional world especially, are echoed really well in this exhibition because, as I'm often saying, it's an exhibition about how people who feel invisible make themselves visible, and women artists throughout history have often faced that. So I saw a lot of connections from this time period, late 19th and the early 20th century, that really played into my strengths of knowledge for women artists.
Was there anything that you came across that you went, oh my goodness, this doesn't match anything in history that I learned in school or any of us learned?
Yeah, you know, I think the fact that all of this is in color really struck me, because if you got to see any of this history in your textbooks growing up, it was maybe a black and white photograph of Susan B. Anthony.
One of the things that you wanted to bring out was this is very much the product of young women in the movement. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, and I think that's also a visual message, because you might read the names of women involved in the suffrage movement, hear their story, their history, hear what they contributed. But sometimes it takes seeing a picture of them to realize, I mean, to me, they look like babies. Lucy Burns and Alice Paul were in their 20s. And we have another exhibition here about the civil rights movement, and those young people that are pictured in that exhibition are so young. I think today we imagine political arguments taking place in, you know, capitals and federal buildings, and it's a different generation of politicians involved. But this show, this movement, was a youth movement.
These young women, you know, in 1913, for Alice Paul and for them, I mean, they were demonstrating in ways that were not happening. For the first time, the protests at the White House had never happened before, and the challenges that they went through. And I think in this exhibit here, you've really told that story. But there's also the women that were untold. And could you expand on that for the collection that you have here for African American women that were really not, how do you say, visualized or brought into the fold?
Well, it doesn't take long for you to look around this exhibition or a book about suffrage history to realize that you're seeing a particular class, a particular race, an economic class represented, and that's partly because it's the way history has been institutionalized.
But is there anything special that you'd like to share that's associated with some of these other events with the exhibit that you would encourage people to come out and see?
Well, we really have tried to have an event for whatever your interest is. We know this is going to bring, or we hope this is going to bring, a lot of new audiences to the Brandywine. So people who might have an interest in art would come, but maybe people with an interest in history and women's studies and politics would come as well. So we wanted to have programs that represent and reflect their interests. So we'll be having discussions with female elected officials. We'll be talking about race and politics and power in the United States. But one thing that I'm especially proud of, and this is probably because I'm a historian, is that Laurel Thatcher Ulrich is coming to give a lecture here. Now, people might not know her name, but you know her slogan, her saying, "Well-behaved women seldom make history."
That's hers.
That's hers, and she's coming here to give a lecture. She's a women's historian. When I went to college, when I went to graduate school, we read all of her books because she was really one of the founding feminist historians that was telling a history of women in the United States. And she's turning her attention to images now, which I'm just over the moon. For a long time, histories have lacked the visual material that we now see is available. So she's turning her attention in a lecture for us coming up in March to a particular illustration and how liberty, the goddess and the personification of liberty, was used in the abolition and the suffrage movement.
Our mission to unite and lead through philanthropy and grant making and advocacy in Chester, specifically in Chester County, to have young women and all women thrive in our community. And I think that this demonstration of the equality fight is worth the fight, and that we continue on.
And you know, this is a story that has, and you can find it in this exhibition, very specific Chester County stories.
You brought up politics, and you know, we're thrilled here in Chester County more than ever. We have more women holding seats in various positions. You know, through the curation, are there any lessons you learned in the importance of voting, particularly for women?
I think just the simple fact that everyone, no matter what your particular party or your beliefs, has to vote to make the system work. And to see and look around this exhibition and see the stories, the struggle for decades that went on to give women today that right, to not take advantage of it is really casting a shadow on their legacy.
Correct.
So
we wholeheartedly agree with you. Everyone at the fund, and certainly all of our members, our volunteers, and our supporters. Well, I thank you. Our fund thanks you, and for participating in this kitchen table talk and segment. Please come out and see this exhibit this spring and early summer. And thanks again.
thank you.